everyone, thank you so much again for joining me. I hope you're all doing well. Today's experiment is I'm going to try and create this weathered looking boat on a beach with the sun setting. I'm going to be using the Winsor Newton rough grain paper, which is 100% cotton, and it is 31 centimetres by 41 centimetres. But as this experiment, I've actually cut the paper down to size as I'm just trying this method out. This is the reference photo that I'll be using. Isn't it lovely? The sun looks fantastic, and I can see there's a lot of texture in the sand, which I've tried to create in a more abstract-y way. I think the most challenging thing here is to create this kind of weathered look on the boat, which I'm going to be using a mixture of wet and wet and layering. And I'm going to be using that throughout the painting, a wet and wet technique, waiting it till it completely dries, and then adding other layers on top to kind of like build the texture and the structure up. So this picture, I found it on Pixabay. I will actually have it on my Patreon page, so if you wanted to download that and use it as your reference photo, please feel free to do that. I'm also going to be I've got some drawings that I will also put on a Patreon page, so again you can download and you can join in with me. So let's get going. Okay, great. So now you've got your drawing done, you want to tape off where the sky meets the sea, and you want to create that lovely horizon there. Use a flat brush with clean, fresh water, and the flat brush will actually make sure that you're not creating any pools of water. So make sure that's all level before you begin. There's no massive pools of water, otherwise it will distort your painting. I'm dropping in some yellow ochre and a few tones of orange here, and I will list all the colours down below. And you can see that's blending quite beautifully here. Now the trick here is to not create any green when it's mixing with the sky, and what I tend to do is not actually mix my paintbrush with the yellow and the blue, and I kind of let it blend naturally. So start from the top, and I'm dropping in my blue tones here and letting that bleed down naturally to avoid creating any green tones there. And so creating nice clean and avoid using green. Now you can see a little bit of green is forming slightly. I will fix that with some more pinkish tones in a moment, a bit of purpley sky tones in a moment, and that will avoid any further mixture of the paint. And again, I'm not worried that it's actually moving on into the rowboat there, because when I'll be creating that boat, I'll be using a mixture of white gouache and in a kind of like a wet and wet technique. So that's nice and dry. So now I'm moving on to the sea, and if you look at the reference photo, there is the sun setting onto the sea, which I thought was quite beautiful. So I'm going to try and create that. But first of all, I'm going to create my first layer of the sea here, and I'm just painting on my cobalt blue, and I'm lifting out some of the paint where the sun is going to be setting. I noticed as well in the reference photo that the horizon is slightly darker, so I'm going to be creating a slightly darker level here. Now completely dried, and I want to move on to the sand in a moment, but I'm just going to strengthen the horizon there, and I'm creating some ripples in the water, and by doing that I'm just using my brush back and forth and creating a bit of texture and movement in the sea. And once that's dry, I'll be dropping in my yellows to create that kind of sun. But I want to kind of create a bit of movement in the water so it doesn't look too flat. Wetting the paint there with clear fresh water again, and I'm going to be using a mixture of raw sienna and some yellow tones to create kind of the first layer of my sand. So it's beautiful and sandy and grainy there. I'm going to blend silver, and this is just the first layer, so I'm going to be building upon this layer in a moment, and just create a lovely, lovely blend there. Here and some raw sienna, just to kind of like try and create that area where there is actually some seaweed on the beach, and I'm letting that blend, and I'm doing this all in wet and wet before it actually dries. So again, this is still the first layer of my painting, and I'm going to try and create a bit of the shadowing and the dips where all the sand is, and this will dry slightly lighter, but I will be building upon this with my multiple layers. Dried, I've re-wetted the painting, and you can see where the salt has bloomed on the painting. It's probably a little bit more than I expected, but that's fine. You do get some surprises with watercolour. So I'm just going to add my second layer now, and as you can see, all the shadows and the dips have dried slightly lighter than what we originally painted, and that's fine because this is about building the multiple layers and adding that texture. So I'm just going to deepen some of the shadows here, and I'm using raw sienna and a little bit of brown in there. just to build the shadow again up onto the boat's head there. Creating these lovely puddles here of raw sienna, and it's like a bit of brown. I'm using different tones. I noticed there was a bit of a puddle created there and I didn't really like it, so I'm mopping that up with a dry brush and see if that actually will help the painting to dry a little bit in that area. Again, just adding a few bits of texture here and there, trying to create that depth in the sand. We always love a little bit of splatter, so just protecting the areas where I don't want the paint to fall on, and I'm using a mixture of raw sienna browns, and I'm using multiple tones of different browns and oranges to create that kind of texture. Some of it is, the paper is still slightly wet in some areas and slightly drier in others, so you are going to get a bit of a mixture of tones here. And it looks very messy, the painting looks a bit ugly at this stage, but I'm really hoping that I can pull this together at the end. To be adding in some cobalt blue here and just painting this very lightly on here, and what I'm going to do now is sort of creating a bit of weathered texture on this boat. And again, this is just the first layer that I'm using. It's going to be a wet and wet technique that I'm going to be using, but I will be adding other layers to create a more depth and more texture, and hopefully create a bit more of a weathered look. I've used a really watery gouache texture, and I'm blending through a bit of cobalt blue, a bit of raw sienna with a bit of brown, just to create this kind of weathered look on the boat. Again, this is kind of going to be multiple layers, but you really want to do this while the gouache is still wet, and it creates that lovely marbly natural flow to that. So I'm going to be using the different sections of this boat, and one at a time, to create this look. back onto the beach area, and I'm quite pleased with the weathered look there. I don't want to overwork this because it will eventually look like a bit of a muddy puddle, so I'm happy to leave the boat as it is. And now I'm going to be dropping in a few shades of Russian and some brown, and then a bit of Payne grey as well to create these lovely shadowy textures. I'm going to try and create a bit more of a dippy area, you know, when there's dips in the sand and the light catches through those. So that's the kind of like the thing that I'm trying to achieve here as well. And I'm using a fine line waterproof pen here, and I'm using a different thicknesses, and I'm starting off with my finest one just so I can get the outline there. And as you can see, the horizon for the water is looking a little bit messy, but I will be tidying that up in a moment. So I'm going to kind of like try and see where the pencil marks are for this, and then with a steady very hand, and just take your time doing this. And as you go along and you're colouring in, you can increase the thickness of your waterproof fine liner. And now I'm going to be moving on to the horizon and just tidy this up a little bit here. What I've tried to do is create where the sun is and the reflection on the sea. I'm just going to darken this a little bit up there so it's a defined line, and I'm just going to add a few more ripples into the sea area here so it looks a bit more natural, and I don't want to take away from the sunset on the beach, on the sea, sorry. Pleased with this experiment. Made a few mistakes here and there, but I think overall it's looking quite lovely, and I will try this method again. I hope you do too. Take care.